Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk. And it has been a stormy last few weeks with two major hurricanes making landfall in Florida in just a little over 2 weeks. And it got me thinking about my message from this past Sunday. In it, I was talking about praising God in the middle of the storms. And really, the point of it is that we're going to have storms in our lives. And how do we get to the point that we can praise God in the midst of the difficulties we face? And one of my points that I made during that sermon was this, and that is that calm seas have never produced a good sailor. And if you think about that, I mean, we can argue whether or not a sailor really wants like a calm sea completely, because if there's no wind, you're not going to be sailing very well. But take it beyond a sailor, just a calm seas have never produced a great skipper. So maybe take away the sailboat element, because a skipper would probably want calm seas if you're, putting out crab nets or, doing a tugboat or a tanker or what have you. If the seas are calm, that certainly would be advantageous. That's what you would want. And you would think that that's what we want in life, but that's not what's best for us. And that's not what is good. It's those trials and it's those tribulations and it's the adversity that we face in life. That's what forges us into the people that we've become, and people of deep faith and trust in God. Well, we've had a couple different hurricanes, and maybe we're going to be done with the hurricanes, but I'm pretty sure we're not done with the storms. And what I mean by that is we are now a month away from the elections, and less than a month, really. And if we think the storms have been bad up until this point, I mean, I can't help but wonder, what is it going to be like after the elections in early November? I don't think it's going to be pretty. I mean, it has gotten so bad that, like, we've politicized hurricanes. And I can't even believe some of the stuff that people are saying. And it seems, well, to say it's utter nonsense is to put it politely. On one side, like, people are actually believing that with Helene, that somehow the government interfered with that storm to make a more powerful storm, so that somehow it would affect and hurt like Trump voters in North and South Carolina, these, potential swing states. And beyond just the ability, like, our government is incompetent on the most basic levels half the time, that we think that they have the coordination and the wherewithal in order to, like, affect these storms. And people are like, oh, they seeded clouds. Yeah, they did back in the 70s. It didn't work out really well. They've done lasers and like, okay, can affect maybe a cloud on a small scale, but nothing the size of a hurricane, nothing on the size of a tornado. So it's just, if anything, it's bad for whenever there's a national disaster or tragedy, that's not great for the party that's in power, because inevitably, regardless of what all they do, it's not going to be enough. And you're already hearing that already. Like, even though there's different categories in which the federal government takes their budget out of, I mean, perception's reality, and people on the right are saying, listen, you've got all this money for immigrants, you got all this money for the people in Lebanon, and you've used all your money for for hurricane relief. Well, those are different coffers and different funds, but once again, perception's reality, and the fact that we've got all this disaster in the Carolinas, that's not going to be thought of well by this country, and it's going to hurt some votes for the party in power. So we politicize, like, we remove reality, and reality no longer matters, and we just politicize for the sake of political gain. And you know what? On the left, they do it as well. On the left, it's Governor DeSantis is doing a horrible job. Like, if there's a Republican governor over, a state that has had these tragedies, they're to blame, and it's their fault. And no one cares about what truth is. No one cares about what reality is. And so my point is like, if we thought these storms are bad, oh my goodness, let's wait for what's to come next, because there is hurricane election coming in less than 4 weeks. And once again, it is not going to be pretty. I don't see how it turns out well. On one hand, like, if the Republicans, if Trump wins, I mean, there's going to be a movement to impeach him just for winning the election. And I wonder how many cities are going to burn if that happens. It will be full freak out mode on the left. But I have to tell you, like, the right used to be the more civilized group, and it's just not the case anymore either. Because I'm here to tell you, if like Kamala wins, it's like people on the right think she's like the whore of Babylon from Revelation. People on the right are like, the elections are fixed. It's rigged. Like there is no good outcome for this election. So I can't even wrap my mind around what it's going to look like immediately after. My Christmas, I decided on my Christmas theme this year for Christmas Eve service, and it's fear not. Fear not, because that's what the angel tells Elizabeth when she's told she's going to give birth to the forerunner of Jesus, John the Baptist. Fear not, when the angel comes to Mary to let her know that she's going to give birth to the Christ child. And fear not to the shepherds that are in the field as the angels come and declare the fact that Christ has been born. I'm pretty confident that come December, one way or the other, we're going to need to hear a message, fear not. Fear not, because ultimately God is with us. And so I have no idea of what early, mid, late November through the end of the year, what it even looks like. And I think a big problem, or a contributor to this problem that we have in the world today and in this country today, is like the absence of a strong presence of the church, and of a strong presence of pastors who shepherd the church and who shepherd the flock, and are willing to call the flock out on its silliness. I mean, if you're for truth, you're for truth. You can't be for your version of truth. There is only one version of truth. And so whether on the right or the left, you can't buy into like all of these crazy conspiracy theories, like Trump somehow shot himself. Like, I'm not taking a side on this. I'm saying the world has gone nuts. And I think part of the problem is the church has lost its voice. And that pastors are more concerned, and many of these large churches are more concerned about being hip and being cool, being fashionable, being attractional, that like we're not even shepherding anymore. We're not doing the dirty, hard, stinky, sometimes putting your life at risk job of shepherding the flock. Because we'd all rather just sit around and sip cappuccinos with each other in a coffee house. One of my members sent me this article about just what the pastors, modern day pastors, have become. And once again, I think that explains a lot of where we've become as a society. And I just want to read it to you as I kind of maybe close on this note with this podcast. It's a little lengthy, but man, it's good. So just stick with me, and I think you'll understand what I'm saying when I say I think the church and pastors are responsible for the lunacy that has taken hold of the world in which we live. And this is what the article said, the post. It said, shepherds were tough, hardy men. They guarded their flocks patiently, passionately, and when necessary, brutally. Among the last things a ravenous wolf or thief would feel when threatening a flock of sheep would be the crushing blow of the shepherd's staff, or a rock striking their head. The protection of the flock was of paramount importance. The soft shepherds leading most Christian churches today amount to little more than an ironic joke. When ice decaf soy lattes filling their Stanley mug. They seek after the faint applause of the godless elite. Our church leaders have abandoned their flocks to the spiritual and physical dangers of a fallen world. Pulpits have long fallen silent on calling out the fashionable sins of the cultural elite. And when they do, it is brief and delivered with an apologetic tone. Far too many pastors have resorted to the safety of sermons that treat Scripture like a second-rate self-help book. The left has been pulling out the threads of the nation's moral fabric with the tacit approval of our clergy. And I might say with that, we're allowing lunacy to be spoken of on the right without any rebuke there as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, the moral decay is by far the greatest threat that's coming from the left. But in reaction to that, the right have lost their minds. And clergy aren't calling that out either. It goes on to say, Jesus spoke forcefully against the political and religious corruption of his day. And we've got it on both sides, political corruption. On page after page of the Gospels, we find him speaking out against those ravenous wolves who use their power to abuse the people. In today's Christian churches, such talk by Jesus himself would have been labeled a troubler. Meanwhile, in the name of peace and purity, a sadly large number of pastors avoid confrontation by making a soft capitulation to the ruling elite. Criticism of the government is verboten. Honest discussion about confiscatory taxes, abortion, and government schools pushing gender-based ideology are avoided. Too many pastors have become unwilling to speak uncomfortable truths in the face of governing power. They do not want to risk offending the sensibilities of the soft leftists in their congregations, and I would also say the full-out conspiracy theorists, right-wing people in their congregation. Indeed, critiques of government policy are silenced in most 21st century churches unless they can be framed in a way that denigrates social and political conservatives. Congregations get fed an earful of false equivocation about the political parties, whether you vote for a Democrat or a Republican. Yet never is voting for a gender-swapping, gun-grabbing, pro-abortion Democrat criticized as an exercise in Baal worship. But most of these pastors will happily accuse their congregation of following a false idol if they vote for any Republican pledging to cut taxes or protect children. Now, I don't know what churches those pastors are found in, but certainly wouldn't find that in anyone that I would step into. Worse still, too many pastors have been actively ushering their flocks into the arms of thieves and the mouths of wolves. When they aren't discouraging political engagement, they are pimping for government programs. Shepherds should be made of better, sterner stuff. When the Hellenists were kicked from Israel in the 2nd and 1st centuries BC, it was a country priest and his sons who led the fight. The life of liberty in America began with the exhortations from the pulpit. And in the American Revolution, pastors stood literally on the front lines, often armed with a musket in one hand and a Bible in the other. If liberty is to die here, that death will have been preceded by the whimpers of ecclesiastical acquiescence. We must not allow that to happen. Parishioners must demand unflinching leaders in their churches. Our times demand physical and mental boldness from our pastors, not spiritualized cowardice. We need the land's pulpits filled with shepherds willing to kill the wolves threatening their flocks. Now more than ever, our republic needs a muscular church unafraid of earthly powers and municipalities. America's legacy as a self-governing people will survive and thrive only to extend our churches to the extent that our churches are willing to speak truthfully, even forcefully, to and about secular government. Listen, and this is truth. And I'm here to tell you, because we have moral truth and God's truth on our side, we don't have to convince people in things that are just not true, that are conspiracy theories, that are idiotic. I mean, you need that. If you don't have truth on your side, you need to make up stories and invent stories that people will believe. But you see, we don't need that. We don't need that at all because we have truth. And so we have to take that high ground, that moral high ground. We've got to boldly and fearlessly speak truth. But when we cloud the message with speaking all kinds of gobbledygook that like just isn't real and doesn't make sense, we don't do ourselves any favors. Once again, one of my favorite passages that I always bring up is that you have the commander of the army of the Lord. Joshua says of the commander of the army of the Lord, "Are you for us or against us?" And his answer is neither, right? The commander of the army of the Lord isn't for Israel and it's not against Israel, but as the commander of the army of the Lord, I have come. I'm not for either political party. Both of them are corrupt, but I am for truth. And I am for those who are willing to stand firm on those principles that are found in the Bible, that if we follow, God will bless. And if we don't, this nation will crumble. And on those we must speak. On those we must never waver. And on those we must stand. And as Martin Luther once said, "Here I stand." I say that is where I stand. Not behind any one political party, but behind truth. And it's being anchored in that truth, being built on that foundation of a solid rock. That is where we stand, and that is where we stand in the midst of storms. And I'm here to tell you, one way or the other, a huge storm is coming. So anchor yourself on that rock and on God's truth, and you will stand, because no good ship captain has ever been made from calm seas, but from stormy seas. That is where a good ship captain is made. If you anchor yourself in the rock of Jesus Christ and his words, I'm here to tell you, the storms are coming, and we're all going to be excellent ship captains, to use that analogy, because we will have learned to survive with integrity and with truth the great storms that are coming before us. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of God Talk. I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. God bless.